when Kestrel asked me to talk about this topic, you start thinking about, what does this look like? What does it look like on a macro level? What does it look like on a day-to-day basis? And I've started thinking, quite often politics reveals itself when the right person doesn't get the job. You'll think, such and such is a shoo-in for that. Doesn't happen. And I started to think, what does organisational politics actually mean? And I did a quick Google search and I got like 1 million definitions about what organisational politics is. So again, you bring it back to, what does it mean to me? So politics to me means that somebody or a group of people are acting in a self-interested way. And again, thinking, what are some good examples about that on the big stage? Well, obviously the one that jumps to mind is Trump, filling the White House with his daughter and his son-in-law. Then we get into nepotism. Is nepotism politics? Well, yes, I think so. So I started to think about then relating it back to my personal experience in the workplace. And I think particularly I started to think about when I was quite a junior person, and you'd see people apply for jobs in big organisations and they wouldn't get it. And as a junior person, you think that you're missing something. You're thinking that the hiring manager knows more than you know, that you're missing something. And as you get older and a little bit more grey hair, it starts to dawn on you that actually this isn't you missing something. This is operational, organisational politics at play. So you start to recognise that politics is at play, but it doesn't make it any clearer as to why it's happening, unless you're directly involved in it. So then I started to think about, as a senior leader over before I started the business in 2013, I had a number of senior management roles in big corporations. And then I started to think, how have I been impacted by project, resource management, politics? Probably in quite a few ways. So I started to think about things that had happened to me. So first of all, you have opportunities to fill a role. You need somebody for your project or for your PMO, and you can't get the funding for the role, either because it's budgetary constraints, or you can't actually even get it acknowledged that you need the role. This happens a lot, particularly in the PMO space, I think, when you're trying to make a case for additional resources. It's like, can't you just get an administrator to do that? Well, no, I can't. This is a skilled role. So you can't get the funding approved, or you can't get acknowledgement that the role is needed. Then you have occasions when you can't get the person you need. So you have someone in mind, but they're not available, or they're not available to you. And sometimes they're not available to you because they've been sent out to do something that's also politically motivated. So that person would be perfect for you, but they're off on a project for somebody else. So also politically motivated. And then you get the person that's appointed to the role, but they're appointed for political reasons. And the example that jumped out at me, this is cases of positive discrimination. And I'll probably flag here, I've probably been on both sides during my corporate career of the positive discrimination piece. But I had the last corporate role I had, and it's one of the reasons it was the last corporate role I had, was that my direct manager had been promoted into that role because she was a woman. And it was an engineering organisation, and she'd been there the longest, and they needed a certain amount of women. She was seriously the worst manager I've ever had, and one of the fundamental reasons why I'll never have a job again. So, as I say, I've probably, definitely also benefited from a political or a positive discrimination appointment as well. I had a couple of roles where I was promoted, I like to think because I was talented and I was good, but it definitely didn't hurt that I was a woman in an engineering organisation, So not all political manoeuvrings are inherently bad, as I say, and maybe this is because it was me, but I like to think when I've been pushed up the tree, it's because people have recognised my talent, but it's not always the case, and other people might disagree with you on why I was promoted, by the way. I can only tell you what I think. But as project and PMO people trying to deliver projects, these political manoeuvrings cause us more problems than the average business unit because we're in a dynamic environment. We've got to move quickly. If you delay that appointment, then that really impacts our delivery potentially. So it causes us stress to not have what we need, but it also causes us stress to work out, is this actually political, or is there a genuine blockage in what we're trying to do here? I think for us it has consequences a little bit beyond the business as usual. So then I started to think, how do we manage politics on our projects and decisions that impact us when we're trying to deliver? So again, when I was managing PMO teams, because my background before I started the business was mostly in leading PMO project controls type teams, really thinking back, I had a political battle of some kind almost every day on my hands, and so just thinking about what that looked like on a day-to-day basis. And in the talking that we were just doing around the table, some of those kind of themes were coming out, that you guys are actually dealing with some of this now. So I faced a pressure sometimes to use a certain organisation, certain subcontract labour, because we like them, because we know them and we like them, and they had a good Christmas do, perhaps. And when I think about how I manage that, that's quite easy as a PMO person, particularly when I had commercials and procurement under me, because I can bring it back to commercials, I can bring it back to probity. If I don't think that's the right thing to do, I can say, well, that's not the way that we engage contractors. So reasonably easy at a certain level to be able to manage that kind of pressure. The other one that I had to deal with a lot, particularly in these large, particularly government type organisations, is pressure to use displaced resources as part of the PMO team. So, particularly in large government or semi-government organisations, they're downsizing. People don't have jobs, but they won't take a redundancy. A client of ours calls this the veggie patch. When people are moved to the client will of course remain nameless, but when people don't have a job and they won't take a redundancy and they can't really get rid of them, they move them to the veggie patch. And as the PMO, and if you need extra resources, it's not kind, is it? It's when you need extra resources, they're like, oh well, we've got these people, particularly if they're more administrative types of people, coordinators, analysts. There's a real pressure to use what you have. And again, I'm very passionate about the PMO space. It's a skill, it's a discipline. It's not somebody who you can just get off the street. And again, the way I managed that in the early days was just to flat out say no. And that will work about 50% of the time. But I think I've learned to manage it in a more political way by saying, I'll definitely go there first and see who we've got and assess the skill. But look, by saying that I would assess the people who were available on merit, and then saying no was usually a much better option than just flat out saying no. There has been occasions where I've managed to find some talent, but it's the exception rather than the rule. It's very hard to be able to make a case to go outside the business when there's people who are sitting there doing nothing. So you've got to manage it. Another situation that I've seen a lot of is pressure to use somebody's mate or somebody that you've worked with before. And again, I've also done this. I've brought people into organisations not because I feel like I'm a person with integrity, not because I feel like I want to do a favour for a mate, or it's not the wrong thing to do. When I've done it, it's been that person has got proven skills. I'm happy to have them on the team. I know I don't have to go through the same training curve. So the way I've decided to approach that now is when somebody says that to me, take it on face value, treat it as a recommendation. It doesn't hurt to look at a resume or do an interview. If it's genuinely nepotism or political, then I can always say no, hopefully. But it doesn't hurt. Again, you judge people on merit rather than trying to buy into taking a stance against the politics. And then my personal least favourite of the political manoeuvrings I've had to deal with is where HR slow down the recruitment process to slow down expenditure, keep headcounts down, or whatever flavour of the month cutback they've got to manage with. And there's no easy answer to that one. Sometimes you're just the victim of it, whether you're on, doesn't matter what you're delivering. If HR, procurement say that it's going to take 3 months, then unless you can do something special or pull something really flash out the bag, it's going to take 3 months. So my kind of technique for managing this is just bang the drum, escalate, 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 make a pest to yourself, try and present some real world consequences. If we can't have this by this date, then this won't happen. So those kinds of conversations, again, about 50% of the time it makes absolutely no difference, but if you can try and manage it, then you may get a result. So the culture of an organisation will often play a part on how political it is, and how projects are resourced. So I've spent a lot of my career, as you can probably tell by my war stories, part of big bureaucratic corporate machines or government agencies. Things don't happen quickly at the best of times, but then when you put a layer of politics on top, it can be very, very difficult to get what you need. One of the nice things about being a consultant working in these organisations is that people will often be upfront about the organisational politics. They don't hide it from you. And if people are dealing with politics under the surface, I'll ask them, I'll say, look, what don't we know here? What can you tell us that will help us help you? And then they'll generally tell you about the politics. So much easier as a consultant than it was to be a leader in these kinds of organisations. So while all of these points around politics and how it can be difficult to get the people we need, not just in terms of individuals, but also in terms of volume of people. Mostly all of this is negative, but there's a power available to us as leaders if we can spot it, if we can manage it, and if we can leverage it for good rather than for evil as far as we can. It'll help us get people on our projects more quickly. So my argument tonight is that our organisational politics can, of course, be a blocking force to project delivery, as well as effective PMO management, but it can also be a tool that we can leverage. We can use it for good. We can make it our rules for engagement when we understand it. We can decide to observe it, we can decide to challenge it, but we must always acknowledge it, which ultimately is for the best interests of the business.